Well, we're getting ready to put our final finish on the boat. And there's only so much of that we can show you, because if we start spraying with all the cameras and everything out, it just gets to be a little bit messy and can get really expensive. So I'm going to walk you through it, all right? And part of that is because everybody out there is going to be doing this a little bit differently. Now, I will say this. In the past, I haven't recommended necessarily that people run out and get spray systems, although I have told people if you have them, go ahead and use them. So I will say this: if you are a home woodworker, or if you have a shop and you haven't looked at the price of HVLP sprayers recently, you should, because you can get them at the big box stores for about $100. And the difference in finish that you get from an HVLP sprayer to a roller or a paintbrush is just almost immeasurable. You can get a great finish with a roller and a paintbrush, but it is just a whole lot more work. And the reason for that is when you put on your varnish or your finish coats with a roller or a paintbrush, it's a lot thicker than it would be if you were just spraying, right? So for $100, if you do a lot of other stuff around the house, that's what I would recommend. But I'll tell you how to do it both ways. First, what are you going to use to do your finish? Well, there are people out there who will tell you you need to go out and get a high-grade marine varnish. And if you told me that you were going to take your kayak and you were going to stick it in the water and you were going to leave it there for 7-8 months at a time, I would agree with them. But the fact is you're going to put your kayak in the water, you're going to take it out, you're going to dry it off, and you're going to put it back in your shed or your garage or somewhere. So really, the most important thing that you're looking for is a UV protection over all the work that you've done. And the fact is you can go and get a spar varnish, and Minwax makes it. There's a lot of companies that make them. We've been using Minwax here for years and years and years. And it's the same stuff that you put on decks and the same stuff that you put on outdoor furniture. It's very, very high UV protection associated with it, and it gets the job done, and it's literally, half the price of high-grade marine varnish. So unless you're just bent on getting a high-grade marine varnish, I would go out and I would get the same stuff that you use on outdoor furniture and decks, because obviously it works. Okay, well, that being said, how do we actually put this stuff on? Well, let's take a look. First, you're going to make sure that you've done everything on the boat you need to do prior to putting the stuff on, right? So for me, I've put little tabs right here all the way around where my hatch is going to go in, because I'm going to put little flippy tabs on there to hold this down, right? So that's been taken care of. And I put these on the same way we put everything else on. A little thickened epoxy, put some tape, held it down, and put a tiny, tiny filler all the way around. And that's going to do the job nicely. Okay, make sure all wood is sealed that you need to have sealed, right? Anything that, like under here, when we sanded all this down, we had to go in there and seal all that. So I've got epoxy underneath here. I'm going to take my foot pedals out. I'm going to make sure that I tape up around the threads to make sure I don't gum all that up. And just in general, make sure that your boat is ready to go. The only thing that you should be left to do after you put on your varnish is to put the seats in and put the bungees on and all the little fittings that go on, right? All the work of the boat should be done at this point. If you look closely, you're going to see that this is a milky white finish. Don't let that bother you. What that means is it's already been sanded, right? So I took some 80 grit paper. Again, if you're not comfortable with 80, use what you're comfortable with. 120, don't go any heavier than 80 for sure. But 120 will get the job done. It'll just take a little bit longer, but it'll probably be a lot safer, right? And then once you get it to this point, you're going to be pretty much ready to do what you need to do. So again, 80, 120, get all the swirlies out and just get it to this point. And you're going to find, once you do that, there's still going to be some highs and lows to it. We're talking about millimeters here. We're not talking about 1/4 of an inch, but just small pitted areas. Don't get overzealous. Don't try to get all that out, because the UV protection, the varnish that you're going to put on here, is self-leveling as well, right? So particularly if you're using a brush or a roller, you're going to be putting it on thick enough so that those little spots really won't matter at all. Okay, so once you do that, how do you put it on? You take, if you're going to do a roller or a paintbrush, what I would recommend is I'm not sure I would thin it out if I'm using those tools and implements, but I would put on a couple of coats. And once that's good and dry, then you can go ahead and sand it. Now, if you've done this before, if you've varnished before, you know that when you use a roller or a paintbrush, for that to dry takes days to get hard enough so that you ought to be sanding it, right? If it's a sunny day, put it out in your driveway and let that sun get to it, and that'll help it cook and get nice and hard. All right, then hand sand. At this point, all we're doing is hand sand. 120 at the most if it's really rough, or go down to 220, and then sand all that down. Then put a couple of more coats on, and then you're gonna sand that down again, and then you should be at that point ready for your final coat. All right? Once you put your final coat on, if all goes well, you shouldn't be doing any sanding after that. You definitely won't be doing any sanding after that. All right, so 5, some people do 6 or 7 coats, but you don't want to just do 1 or 2 coats because you won't get a great finish that way, and you really want to try to build up that UV protection. If you're using a sprayer, kind of a whole different ball of wax, right? The whole idea behind sprayers, particularly the new HVLP sprayers, is it only puts out a little bit at a time. So you're not looking to spray on a heavy coat. You're looking to spray on a nice, thin, light coat. So when it's like this, you'll know you have a nice, thin, light coat when it all gets dark and pretty again. Don't try to put more than that on, because when you're using a sprayer, it's going to be dry in about 6 hours or so. So you can come back and put another coat on. So you can put on at least 2, maybe 3 coats a day doing it that way. So by the end, and you're going to end up wanting to put on about 7 coats, more if you really want that, you know, shiny finish to it. So it's going to take you a few days to do it. If you're a working kind of person, then you do coat in the morning before you leave and a coat when you get home. Now it only takes, you know, to both this side, it only takes about 10 minutes to spray the whole thing. It takes longer to clean up than it does to actually spray. Okay, what else can I tell you here? Oh, the varnish itself. This is a matter of taste, but this might help you out. When I'm out on the water and I've got that sun beating down, the last thing in the world I want is the sun beating back up into my eyes off the boat, right? So you will notice that in our shop, we use a satin finish. If you really want that high gloss shine because you think it looks really great, my suggestion is keep that to the outside of the boat. Don't do it on the decks, don't do it on the interior. Because for me, I get a headache after that sun shines in my eye for that amount of time. Right, so satin looks great. Matter of fact, satin is what we have on the bottom of this boat, and it looks great. We put it on all of our boats. We very, very rarely use high gloss. Again, number 1 priority here is UV protection. That's what you're going for, because epoxy will break down. Even if somebody's selling you epoxy that says it's UV protected, I'm not sure I believe it because I've never seen it. There are some new epoxies on the market that say they're UV inhibitors inside of it. Well, that doesn't mean it's UV protected. So don't let that fool you. As a matter of fact, we don't even send it to our customers because it's way too much of a temptation for them not to go ahead and take care of putting varnish on there. So that's it. That's about all that I can tell you about doing the finish. We're going to go ahead and pack all this stuff up, and we're going to put a finish on this, and then we'll bring you back in when we're ready to put all the little baubles on and finish this thing up.